Truth.
Hi everybody, and welcome back to Candid Truth. If you're new here, I'm Aubrey, Jenny, and we are going to be covering today Valentine's Day. Let's dive into this. Valentine's Day is actually known as Lupercalia. The word February in and of itself comes from februum, meaning purification. It also has the word februa in it, which are whips made from sacrificial goats, which were symbols of fertility and strength. We will come back to that one because it's a very interesting connection. Why do whips have anything to do with Valentine's Day, you might ask? We're going to get there. So the Feast of Lupercalia was what it was called. It was actually celebrated originally on February 15th, and young men called Luperci ran through the streets, whipping women with strips of goat hide, called februa. Women eagerly participated, believing that being struck by the whips would increase fertility and ease childbirth. Here is an article from the Templeton Honors College. It actually talks about why candy, hearts, and bloody knives, the weird history of Valentine's Day. This says, our story begins, as so many stories do, in ancient Rome, where the festival of Lupercalia was celebrated every year on the Ides of February. Lupercalia from the Latin lupus, for wolf, and calitis, for hot. The Hot Wolf Festival. It was a fertility festival that marked the beginning of spring in the Mediterranean. A special class of priests called the Luperci sacrificed goats and a dog to Faunus and other Roman fertility gods. Then 2 of the Luperci approached the altar, where their foreheads were touched with the bloody knife and cleaned with milk. Finally, the 2 Luperci cut the hides of the sacrificial animals and fashioned them into whips, then ran naked through the streets of Rome, whipping the women they passed by. A touch of the Lupercalia whip was believed to grant a woman fertility until the next year. So there you have it. That's where the whip comes in. That's why it's a part of things. As you will see, it gets a little deeper than that, and we'll get to the root of what Valentine's Day and Lupercalia is really all about. They continue, Shakespeare enthusiasts and Roman history scholars may recognize the Ides of February as significant in the life of Julius Caesar. Mark Antony tried to crown him with a laurel wreath 3 times at the Lupercalia festival in 44 BC, an event dramatized in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar. The display didn't sit well with the Roman Senate, who began plotting to assassinate Caesar a month later on the Ides of March. The festival was held at the Lupercal cave, where Romulus and Remus were said to have been nurtured by the she-wolf. Now we'll get into this. It's 2 young baby boys, twins, who were in the wilderness and said to have been raised and nurtured by this wolf. Who's a mother, you might ask? Where did these children come from? Well, let's cover that. According to Roman mythology, Romulus and Remus were born to Rhea Silvia, a Vestal Virgin. If you have not heard of Vestal Virgins, I had mentioned them before. I've yet to cover it all by itself, but please look through my other videos so you can go back and figure out what those Vestal Virgins are. I will tell you that they were a group of usually 16 women that were chosen from elite families to be giving their life for several years straight to the service of the temple, the pagan temple to Vesta. And they were supposed to keep the flame alive that protected the luck of defending the fortress of the city, people's lives, fortunes, and luck with the gods, everything. So their chastity, their virginity, keeping their virginity alive or being chaste fully was their prerogative, and to keep this flame alive. And if they didn't keep their virginity well, they would have all kinds of punishments that they would go through. So they weren't allowed to have children. They weren't allowed to be pregnant. So this was their mother. Getting back to the story, Romulus and Remus had a mother that was a Vestal Virgin, and so she had to give them up. She was the daughter of Numitor, the rightful king of Alba Longa. So that's just a historical text from a historian of that day. And it says that Rhea Silvia was a priestess of Vesta, the Roman goddess of the hearth, home, and family. I've spoken about her before. It says right here, Dionysius of Halicarnassus wrote that. As a Vestal virgin, she was sworn to celibacy, meaning she was forbidden to have children. However, she became pregnant with the twins Romulus and Remus, which led to her downfall. Also, a note on this, which is interesting. If you're thinking like I am, I grew up with Star Trek. The only thing that keeps flashing my mind when I say Romulus is the Romulans, the alien Romulans.
Commander Tomahawk. As I'm sure you already know, we were responding to warnings of Romulan incursions at Nelvana 3.
I have to laugh a few times because that's what I'm hearing. Let's go back. Who was the father? There are two versions of this story. One says that it's Mars, the god of war. The most common versions say this, and that the god of war seduced, or in some versions, forcibly impregnated Rhea, Silvia, making Romulus and Remus demigods. Some variations suggest that it was not Mars, but a mortal man who impregnated her, or that she was tricked. Either way, here is where they have introduced the idea of them being demigods. Yes, they were considered gods. Rhea, Silvia's uncle, Amulus, had overthrown her father Numitor to take the throne of Alba Longa. To prevent Numitor's bloodline from continuing, Amulius forced Rhea Silvia to become a Vestal virgin, ensuring that she would never have children. When she gave birth to Romulus and Remus, Amulius saw them as a threat to his rule and ordered the babies to be drowned in the Tiber River. How did they survive? The infants were placed in a basket and set adrift on the Tiber. But instead of drowning, they were saved by the river god Tiberinus. It's interesting because if you are hearing this, it sounds like Moses, right? To save his life, he was set adrift in a basket, and the river gods, which is what the Egyptians thought, the river gods saved him. And the Pharaoh's daughter even said that the river has given me a son. There's that overlap. I'm sure they're thinking, yeah, our story of Romulus and Remus is just like Moses, but is the more accurate one. It's the true story of the gods. So there's the counterfeit there. That last paragraph there says they eventually washed ashore and were nurtured by a she-wolf named Lupa in a cave before being found and raised by a shepherd named Faustulus and his wife. The festival of Lupercalia honored Faunus, which is actually called Lupercus. It's a Roman fertility god often associated with the wilderness, shepherds, and the protective spirit of the wolf. Now, as they got older, you see Romulus himself was said to have been deified after his death, similar to how Augustus later claimed divine status himself. As you look at the history of how Rome was founded, it was founded by Romulus, and Apollo's influence came later through Greek influence. There's a huge connection here. This is from Botanica, and it says almost 3,000 years ago, the Roman Empire was born here in central Italy, on the site by the river Tiber, nestling among 7 hills. Does that sound familiar? 7 hills. Yeah, it should. The city of Rome, where the Vatican is nestled on 7 hills. A dramatic story is said to have taken place here all those years ago between twin brothers called Romulus and Remus. It had been predicted that the 2 brothers would become mighty leaders, but they were the victims of an evil plot. Their power-crazed great-uncle, ordered that the babies should be drowned. Yet, miraculously, they were washed up on the banks of the Tiber. A she-wolf took it upon herself to care for the twins, suckling them and thus giving them the strength to survive. The she-wolf remains the symbol of the Roman Empire to this day. Interesting. It meant that much to them that they made it the symbol of their day. And to this day, it still survives that way. It became the symbol of Rome, an empire which over the next centuries was to exert its influence across the known world, primarily through expansionist wars. But the empire experienced its first war, a conflict between the brothers Romulus and Remus. at the very founding of its capital, in a fit of pique, Remus leaps across the provisional city wall, which his brother had erected. Romulus cannot tolerate this act of provocation and slays his own brother. The founder of Rome thus made one thing clear from the start. Anyone attempting to breach the fortifications of Rome would be severely punished. He said, "Those who violate the laws of Rome will meet the same fate as my brother." So I always like to read a few of these from different sources to start putting together some more of the details. And so we have not just that they were supposedly raised by this she-wolf, but that this symbol now and the statue has become the symbol of Rome to this day, and that she was suckling them at her breasts to keep them alive, and that they became enemies because of this, that Romulus was chosen and deified and supposedly more special, set apart for this mission, and Remus was not. And when he chose to create this wall that separated the city of Rome already, Remus jumped over the wall and he said, "Those who violate the laws of Rome will meet the same fate as my brother," and he killed him. So does that stand true today? And what we see with the Roman Catholic Church throughout history, those who oppose them in all cases, they have always threatened and killed and moved out of their way. So it started then, and I'm sure that's become their motto. But it started not just with him, by the way, but he founded Rome. Obviously, he was a huge key player in this. And so on the foundings of his own brother's blood, Rome was made its capital and a great city. So going back to Lupercalia, which we said was originally on the 15th of February, what happened on that day is that the sacrifice of goats and dogs was believed to purify Rome, removing evil spirits and ensuring good health for the coming year. The running and whipping symbolized driving out impurities, much like other Roman cleansing rituals. The festival marked the transition from winter to spring. So this is another solstice/equinox festival, time periods which the Bible says not to be observers of times like this. I'm not sure why. Everything, I know why. Everything is about their solstices and equinoxes, but just to make it clear, this is another one of those. The festival marked transition from winter to spring, a time associated with renewal and fertility. Romans believed that impurity and bad omens could bring disease, infertility, or poor harvests. Many Roman religious festivals included some form of sacrifice, cleansing, or symbolic renewal to maintain divine favor. By sacrificing animals, spreading their blood, and engaging in ritualistic running and whipping, Romans believed they were cleansing society and ensuring fertility for individuals and the land. Here we can see that it is being associated with the whole entire well-being of Rome, the entire land, and its fertility, its harvest, its thriving and success. And so we have that kind of weight being put on these Vestal Virgins for one, but your participation in this would then be pretty crucial to this, having the land be under good morale, fortune, and blessings from the gods. In reality, and we have to look at reality, what Valentine's Day is a fertility and purification ritual. We just read about it. This is what they told us. We do come to that realization that it is a fertility and purification ritual and festival for doing so for everyone. So, what God has to say about this, other than the other verses I have brought up, it says in Jeremiah 10:2-4, "Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathens are dismayed at them." It's not just talking about the heavens as though you look at them and you think they're beautiful and marvel at them. Their solstices and equinoxes were all following astrology. And that means that you worship the stars and you follow the stars, and everything is dictated by the stars. You divine or tell the future with them, and give people's fortunes based on them and everything. And they are just made by them. It's everything to a lot of them. So we are not to be like that. Deuteronomy 12, verse 30. Take heed to thyself, that thou be not snared by following them. After that they be destroyed from before thee, and that thou inquire not after their gods. And of course, this is also talking about the foreign peoples around them in the Bible that were tied down or snared by these gods in their worship, and that we are not to ask how did they worship these gods, and we're going to do the same. What we've come to as a society today for a long time, actually, since it was instituted by the Roman Catholic Church, the red heart, the balloons, the color red, the roses, gift giving, wine drinking, the festivities that it has incurred. Why is that? How did we get the word Valentine even associated with this? Well, in 496 AD, Pope Gelasius I declared February 14th, one day before the regular festival held in antiquity, as Saint Valentine's Day, replacing the pagan festival with a Christian holiday, supposedly Christian, honoring Saint Valentine, who was a martyr associated with love and compassion. He conducted secret marriages in the dead of night for those truly in love and did good deeds in his community. Now, one might ask as well, how did Cupid get associated? That is this next part here. The story of Cupid, the Roman god of love, also connects to Valentine's Day because he is associated with desire, romance, and matchmaking. Cupid's role as a mischievous love deity aligns with the themes of love and passion celebrated during Lupercalia and later Valentine's Day. Now, right there, adding Cupid into this whole mix, that is due to the Greeks coming with their, it is the Roman god of love, but it was more influenced by their also mimicking the Greek gods, who brought in more of this drinking and merriment and sexual stuff. And so there's this connection. They had a god that was similar and many others that followed. And so it was kind of wrapped into a package together with the original origins of Valentine's Day based on Lupercalia and the Lupercalia cave and the she-wolf and the two twin brothers and the whipping. And then you have this wrapped into it. Suddenly it becomes painted over with a story of Saint Valentine. And because he was just good-willed towards people who wanted to be in love, he conducted secret marriages. So then all of a sudden he's a wonderful guy and does good deeds in his community. And then you've got Cupid being wrapped together in that as well. So it's a mixed bag and not really at all what it used to be, even though because it's held on that day and it's still the same thing, does that make it okay? No. A holiday is holy. It's called a holy day to the Roman Catholic Church. And when they made it a national holiday or worldwide, they just made it global worship, if you will. And that was their intention. They like that. So just because it's been given a new package, a new exterior, and said intention and meaning, does that make it right? I will leave that to you guys. Cupid, a little more on him. He was a winged boy with a bow and an arrow. His arrows were magical. Those struck by them fell deeply in love. Cupid is the Roman counterpart of the Greek god Eros. There you go. Though in earlier myths, Cupid is traditionally said to be the son of Venus, goddess of love and beauty, and Mars, the god of war. This combination symbolizes the idea that love, which is Venus, and conflict, Mars, are closely linked, as love can often be unpredictable, passionate, and even chaotic. So how did the heart become the symbol? This has been one of my questions, as well as several others. How did the heart become the symbol? And there is a reason. There's a very definite reason. The heart has long been associated with emotion, love, and the soul. Ancient Greeks and Romans believed emotions, especially love and passion, came from the heart rather than the brain. In some ancient cultures, the stylized heart shape resembled ivy or fig leaves, which were symbols of fertility and enduring love. In the medieval and Renaissance ages, people started associating the heart shape with romantic love, especially in poetry and art. Now, I will add that those heart-shaped leaves, in most cases, are also an aphrodisiac. And a summary here, Romulus and Remus was Lupercalia, which included and was about fertility and love themes, apparently. Lupercalia's romantic and fertility elements became Valentine's Day, blended with pagan traditions. Cupid was included, a carryover from Roman mythology, symbolizing love, the Roman god of love. Over time, the essence of Lupercalia transformed from wild fertility rites. I'm glad that they're saying that because that is true. Wild fertility rites is what ensued, into the more romantic and sentimental customs of modern Valentine's Day itself. There is a secret to this heart-shaped thing. In fact, the ancient plant Silphium is closely connected to both love and the heart shape, and it was also used as an early form of birth control and abortion aid in ancient times. This comes from the Atlas Obscura, and it says the original seed pod that may have inspired the heart shape. This historical botanical theory has its roots in ancient contraceptive practices. Surprise, surprise, huh? Yeah, that is quite an interesting shape to be remembered as your contraceptive aid. Continuing on, they also say about this plant, it is a modern-day Silphium plant named after its ancient analog. The heart shape, with its rounded top and pointy end, is pretty innocent for a graphic. It lacks the ribald connotations of a lipstick smack or the peach emoji. But when using it to mean I love you, we may be calling back to something slightly more risque, an ancient contraceptive. This seal, or this mold that they have here in the stone or impression, is a Cyrenian coin from the 6th century BC with a silphium seed imprinted in it. Wow, it's like perfect heart. We're going to talk just about the Valentine's Day card, why that came into existence. It'd be remiss if we didn't start off by providing at least a snapshot of Saint Valentine. On the one hand, he's renowned as a patron saint of love and marriage. On the other, epilepsy, plague, and beekeeping. He has a dual personality of both good and evil. And that's interesting. You see all of that happen when you're talking about Roman mythology or gods. This, by the way, comes from the History Channel Sky History. And the second paragraph down, it says, even the Catholic Church accepts that Saint Valentine may be a conflation of two, maybe even three individuals. In 1969, the Roman Catholic Church removed St. Valentine from the general Roman calendar, so as little is known about him. The basic story is that he was sentenced to death by Claudius Gothicus for marrying Christian couples. He was beheaded outside the Flaminian Gate of Rome on the 14th of February, 269. So what I do know is that usually in the occult, they like to actually set up dates to remember pursuing their enemies and suppressing others. And it definitely seems as though that's what they're doing here. There could be a connection to them actually calling, not only, I'm not going to dismiss the history we've just looked at from Lupercalia, but they had another reason on this day to set up the 14th of February as Valentine's Day to remember him and their killing of him because he did this. So, also from Sky History, the dawn of the Valentine's Day card. There isn't much evidence that the Feast of Valentine inspired the writing of love notes until 1415, when the imprisoned French Duke of Orleans wrote a romantic letter to his wife, citing Valentine from the Tower of London. This lack of cards is hardly surprising, as most of the population was illiterate. However, it's evident from Geoffrey Chaucer and William Shakespeare, both of whom refer to him in their works, that Saint Valentine was a familiar figure in the Middle Ages. It wasn't until the Victorians began to take advantage of their literacy and the uniform penny post system that the sending and receiving of Valentine's Day cards became more popular, though not all were declarations of love. Now, that might be interesting to find out that not all of the love letters or Valentine's Day cards were love letters, but this is where we start realizing that St. Valentine's was known by many popular and famous individuals of that day. Next, they say that there were Vinegar Valentines. Wow. To most decent people, the thought of sending degrading cards to someone you don't like on Valentine's Day is strangely obnoxious. But it's been claimed that about half of Victorian Valentine's cards were either mocking or downright insulting in tone. For obvious reasons, not many of these cards survived, but a few examples featured drawings and text mocking a person for being bald, an alcoholic, aggressive, indiscreet, or even supporting women's suffrage. One notable example featured an image of an approaching locomotive with the verse, "O miserable, lonely wretch, despised by all who know you. Haste, haste your days to end. This sketch the quickest way will show you." So they mocked and degraded each other with these cards. They also had, stinking, degrading cards that they gave each other. But why would you do that? Why would you even... This is particular card is actually suggesting that you kill yourself. And so it's very disgusting in its nature. And I remember getting a few cards that were like that in my, I think they're out there in the Valentine's Day cards that are circulating. They're, made already for you to get. Maybe it's Pooh Bear or whatever age you are. That was in like 4th grade. But not all of them were kind. They're very teasing and mocking. And so I didn't appreciate that when I was a child. But getting back to this, last paragraph, in another particularly extreme example, the Pall Mall Gazette reported the sorry of a woman sending her estranged husband an offensive Valentine. It read, "In his anger, he purchased a revolver, and meeting his wife last night, shot her in the neck. The woman lies in the hospital in a critical condition." I can't believe someone would actually just write that as though they're thinking that morbidly about that having done to them. This also comes from the History Channel, And it says, who created the first Valentine's Day box of chocolates? By the 1840s, the notion of Valentine's Day as a holiday to celebrate romantic love had taken over most of the English-speaking world. It was Cupid's golden age. The prudish Victorians adored the notion of courtly love and showered each other with elaborate cards and gifts. Into this love-crazed fray came Richard Cadbury, scion of a British chocolate manufacturing family, who was responsible for sales at a crucial point in his company's history. Scion means a branch of a British chocolate manufacturing family. Cadbury had recently improved its chocolate-making technique so as to extract pure cocoa butter from whole beans, producing more palatable drinking chocolate than most Britons had ever tasted. This process resulted in an excess amount of cocoa butter, which Cadbury used to produce many more varieties of what was then called eating chocolates. Richard recognized a great marketing opportunity for the new chocolates and started selling them in beautifully decorated boxes that he himself designed. So, it's due to Richard Cadbury and the chocolates he designed, having had the experience from his family who was already in chocolate making. So, there you have it. Not to mention that it releases oxytocin, which is like getting a hug, so you feel loved, you feel happier and safe, and so you feel more like you're in love. You feel happier. Let's read on. From that point, it was a quick jump to taking the familiar images of cupids and roses and putting them on heart-shaped boxes. While Richard Cadbury didn't actually patent the heart-shaped box, it's widely believed that he was the first to produce one. Cadbury marketed the boxes as having a dual purpose. When the chocolates had all been eaten, the box itself was so pretty that it could be used again and again to store mementos. Mementos from locks of hair to love letters. The boxes grew increasingly elaborate until the outbreak of World War II, when sugar was rationed and Valentine's Day celebrations were scaled down. But Victorian-era Cadbury boxes still exist, and many are treasured family heirlooms or valuable items prized by collectors. Now you know. You should also know why the she-wolf, why those two babies in the wilderness with nobody to raise them, where that comes from. You have Cupid in there, and you have the whipping celebrations that would have occurred. It is a little bit more gruesome than they show. From what I read, these men usually were only wearing a covering for their groin and their backside, maybe a loincloth, but they carried out these sacrifices of the goat and the blood on the knife, cleansing it with the milk, but they also had taken that whip, gone about town, and women were ready. They were kind of exposing shoulders and backs and taking some of their clothing off to be whipped. Very, very into it and wanting to be whipped. And they wanted to have some of that blood flow from them to show that they'd been whipped by it. They'd been blessed by it and were now fertile, and their fortune and blessings and luck were all to come. And so there would have been blood splattering and people being in a frenzy that kind of seemed erotic in nature as well. And that's what's missing from this picture, is this kind of animalistic craze for sex, passion, desire, and in doing so, calling it a guise of fertility and blessings for the entire land to appease the gods and so on. And so as for me and my house, we will worship the Lord. That's all that I can say. I've given you the proof. I've shown you where it all comes from. I hope you guys all enjoyed this. We have links to donate on our website. Just click the donate button on the top right. We have merchandise there if you go to our shop. If you feel led to give, we have other methods of payment apps that you can use. Like and subscribe, and I hope we will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Candid Truth.